I work for MWR InfoSecurity, and we also go by the branding of MWR Labs. I'm actually a UK director, but we do have a New York office out here, and as you can tell, I sound very British.
Can you get a bit closer to the mic?
I don't want to get too close to it. Okay? It's like a stand-up show. Okay. What was I? Yeah, so I am a director of the UK Professional Services Consulting Division. I have a long history of delivering technical penetration testing, offensive type security, and I specialize in an area that you guys are probably more familiar with, what we call red teaming, except we call it something different and it's slightly different. And that's kind of some of what I'm going to cover in this talk. But basically what I largely do are what we coin as like simulated attacks. And that's where we put an organization through a live fire drill of, they think a real attack is occurring, and then we benchmark how they react to it, and we use it as a learning exercise. You guys probably think of this as a red team, but there's some nuances that we'll kind of cover, and that's what I want to try and do is explain what rainbow teaming is. Now, it's not a new term. It's not something that's going to be adopted. It's not something that I'm promoting, but it kind of captures what I'm talking about. As we go through the talk as well, we'll kind of get that covered off, and then I'm going to talk to you about some of our tradecraft, that's MWR's experiences, how we've approached red team type testing, the types of tools we use, the TTPs we employ, how they've matured over time, what's prompted us to evolve in that way, i.e. what defensive challenges have we had to overcome. So hopefully there's going to be some takeaways for anyone in the room. And by a show of hands, how many sort of guys, girls self-identify as red teamers in here? Blue, black, gold, purple. So you're a full rainbow teamer, are you? Cool. Okay. And also I'll wrap up the talk with some idea around defensive tactics, techniques that can be used to respond to some of the tradecraft that we're employing. Rainbow teaming. Okay, so what is it? Why is there no pink team? Okay, everyone's seen the movie, nobody wants to be in the pink team. But I'm sure as we evolve even further, maybe there'll be a pink team, maybe there'll be a mauve, I don't know. But we seem to be putting them into buckets of color. Okay, so black team, this is brand new. No one's actually using this term properly. It's essentially because you guys have red teaming, and in the UK, we see red teaming as being largely physical, so of like burglary, scaling fences and stuff. And we don't really do that in the UK. It's not really the forte of many threat actors. So for reasons I'll explain a little bit later on, but essentially there's, in the UK, the Bank of England have come up with a regulatory scheme for this type of assessment, and they've put physical into a bucket called black teaming. I'm sure you're all familiar with red teaming, which is kind of the digital offense side of things, which is, your phishing attacks and the like, where you break in with an implant or a piece of malware and then move to an objective. Blue often refers to the detection response team. They may be separate teams, but quite sort of bucketed into the same thing. So those are the guys running your SOC, looking for your alerts, maybe doing a little bit more proactive activities. It could be your incident responders, the guys that boots on the ground when the proverbial hits the fan. And you've got purple. Now, I've heard people, mainly in the States, talk about purple teams, as in you have a red team, a blue team, and a purple team. Now, for me, purple teaming is more conceptual. It's a relationship, it's a collaboration, rather than a physical external entity to a red and blue team. It should be purple team used as a descriptive language to articulate red and blue coming together for a common goal. Gold team. Now, this throws most people. People are like, what the hell is a gold team? Okay, are you, whether you're in the red team or blue team and working within a business, most organizations will have a group of people that come together in a sort of crisis. It doesn't have to be a digital breach. It could be anything that business is going through, that it needs those sort of generals of the battlefield, the guys that come together, and they're the ones that make the tough decisions. They might end up sat in front of the press. They might be having to deal with a digital breach, or it could be something else. It could be a toxic spill, whatever. So a gold team is that group and putting them through their paces and testing those. Now, how's it all come about? Well, I'm a little bit old, maybe not as old as some in the room, but definitely older than others. And I've been in the industry within the UK for quite a while. And what I've seen is, from the very beginning, very cowboy-like behaviors displayed by various different pen test firms. And organizations that wanted to procure our services that were quite relaxed about them as well. In the early days, it was kind of, okay, you guys are the hackers, come and break in, put a file on my desktop, and then I'll believe that you're any good. Then over time, that kind of matured slightly. People, either because they started to employ pen testers that crashed networks, brought down boxes, and then people panicked and cried and screamed, etc. And the reaction was, okay, then we can't allow this free reign to continue. We need to test with very narrow scopes, control the risk, and it became very compliance-driven, almost boring in cases, definitely not holistic. But then we've kind of come round full circle. Now, as more and more organizations have been breached, you've got a lot of threat intelligence firms out there that are releasing information about adaptive and capable real nation-state threats, as well as criminal groups, that really don't operate like pen testers and obviously operate without any scope. So the industry or organizations that are looking to defend themselves against these types of attacks have recognized that a pen test just isn't going to cut it. And now it's back to, right, come at me with all you've got. Let me see. Whilst the industry has matured on both sides, organizations recognizing that they need to take cybersecurity that much more serious, and vendors out there have also matured and used robust methodologies, advanced tradecraft and tooling, etc. This has been spurred on, at least in the UK, where we're really into our regulation, by regulators. So there are various schemes out there, government and commercial and financial and other sectors, that demand a certain level of, or have an expectation that certain organizations will have gone through an advanced level of cybersecurity assurance. You can rubbish it or think what you want about certain schemes out there, PCI being a good example, but what they are great for has been a catalyst to get a lot of organizations to mature rapidly and start to at least think about cybersecurity outside of just a very narrow-scoped pen test. The main ones for me that I come across in the UK are the Check Scheme, CREST, Bank of England's CBEST, which is a regulatory framework for testing financial institutions' resilience to capable attacks and breaches. And that's gone over into places like Singapore under the ICAST scheme, and Hong Kong under ICAST. Singapore's launches soon, Kuala Lumpur, and I know the US are looking at this as well. So what these schemes have done is try to map out a methodology for delivering this type of test. Again, what you guys would call red teaming, what I would call targeted attack simulations. But hopefully we'll find a common lexicon at some way. But there's been this attempt to classify it, and that's why we've ended up with all the lovely colors. But what we've also had is vendors coming along with their own terminology to confuse it slightly as well. And as you can see, we've had full spectrum cyber, targeted attack simulations, I mean that's one of ours, full spectrum attack simulations, cyber, etc. And if you can imagine that you're an organization looking to procure some level of assurance against this sort of stuff, and you're going out trying to buy this, the language is so confusing. How do you know what you're getting? Is that the same as that? Is that something different? Is that better? Is that worse? So there has to be a common lexicon. Now, I do not advocate that it's rainbow teaming. That really is just me taking the piss a little. But we do have to come up with something at some stage. Otherwise, we'll end up with rainbow teaming or full spectrum cyber. I personally don't care what it is called, just that it's done properly. And for me, for something like this to be done properly, it means going into a business, speaking to the board about what their real concerns are from a cyber perspective, i.e. what threats do they think they're facing, how resilient do they think they are, what outcomes are they looking to get from such an engagement. And then I work my way backwards and design that program. And it becomes a cybersecurity program, which doesn't sound as sexy as threat emulation, simulation, full spectrum cyber, or rainbow teaming. But it doesn't really matter. It's what resonates with the board. Now the problem is, the colors at least do resonate with many boards at the moment. Obviously, Probably not gold and black team out here yet, but eventually we're moving in that direction. So what do these things mean to me? Okay, and how do I go about one of these types of assessments? How would I build it out? Now, typically when I get engaged with a client that wants to procure our services, a lot of people want a red team because red team's super hot and sexy and everyone knows what a red team is, and most board members have read it in some in-flight magazine, and they come back to their business going, I want a red team, get me a red team, we need a red team. And then no one challenges them and goes, okay, we'll go get you a red team. But unless you've actually got a benchmark of your own defensive capabilities against some kind of measurable standard, how are you going to measure the success criteria of a red team? A red team isn't there just to come along and slap you in the face and say, aren't we clever? It's supposed to be about helping an organization build up their defenses, train their people, and make them more resilient to attack, or at least assist them with the detection response capabilities. So if you're going to do that, you need to measure, you have to have some kind of starting point. And if you don't have that starting point, what are you really handing that cash over for? So my advice would be, for any organization, if you don't have that benchmark to start off with, go and get it. And there's various ways to go and get it. You can use your internal teams. You can look at frameworks such as ATT&CK, which is a great matrix, a catalog that contains lots of different TTPs in a matrix format, and they've even extrapolated it down so you can emulate particular threat actors from TI reports that are out there. And all you're really doing is making sure that all that security spend that you've handed over to various vendors for their little blinking boxes are doing what they should do. And its best example is AV. Okay, everyone rubbishes on AV, but at least it catches a lot of crap. And you don't want that crap on your network. But at the same time, you don't want to be caught out by that crap. So if you've got AV, you just want to make sure that it's working, it's ticking along. You don't want to put a lot of effort into it. So run some automated test cases, benchmark that what you've bought is doing what it should do. And then at least, if you use something like ATT&CK, you can get a gap analysis. You know you're picking up these certain things, you're not picking up those certain things. You can go away and tweak those yourself, or then you can start thinking about more advanced things, depending on your level of maturity. Now, internal at MWR, we have our own tooling. We have something called Attack Sim, where we can run automated playbooks and different tradecraft and different sort of attack paths through it, and we can benchmark that detection response capability to help tweak it. Caldera is an automated proof of concept, very much in beta, but it's available from MITRE as well, and then you can roll your own. Like I said, that framework is there, those TTPs, every command you need to run, whatever scripting language you like, you can just script that up, run it, even if you have to manually type it in and just see the right alerts to fire. Okay, then I would move on to what you guys probably call a red team and I would call an attack simulation, which is basically you want to put blue team through a live fire exercise with a red team. But we also drop in some of their own blue team guys that will sit with the client's blue team to benchmark their abilities as they go. They can either train them and tutor them along the way by steering them in the right direction, or they can just sit back and observe and get a true measure and produce that gap analysis. And also we embed some red teamers to give that purple team element, either as part of the engagement or at the very least at the end of the engagement. Our red team go in, share all our tradecraft, all our tools, verbose attack paths, what we did, why we did it, when we did it, etc. And we're open to full interrogation by the blue team so they can fully understand the attack. And then we might rerun various elements of it as well, because it's a learning exercise. That's where the real fun starts, and that's where the real value is. The value doesn't come by steaming in and smashing all the things and getting domain admin. The value comes from showing how we did that, how we operated within that environment, why we did what we did when we did it, how we reacted, how we adapted, etc. The core of this is that red is there to skill up blue, not to prove a point or have an ego. We also like to include the gold team element. It might be during the engagement if you can get that crisis management team together. If not, once you've finished, blue team have had their chance, interrogated you, gone through it all the playbooks are open, then do a tabletop exercise with that crisis management team. Rerun through the exercise using that as a playbook and seeing how people react, how they go through it. There will not be any wrong answers. You just want to see how people will react under that pressure, under what would be a real attack, with contextualization against their own environment. So that's kind of rainbow teaming, but don't call it rainbow teaming. We've got to come up with a new name that resonates. Now, the rest of this talk now, I want to walk through some of our tradecraft, how we've evolved it over time, and some defensive tips as well as we go. Now, I've personally, over the past 3, 4, 5 years, something like that, worked with a team of guys where we've robbed a lot of banks, gone into mines, done crazy things with, crazy computer systems, casinos, all sorts of different places we've been into. And over these years, what we've seen, especially with the clients that we work most often with and go round this circle, is they get maturer and maturer all the time. I'm going to talk about what I've come across and what my team's come across from my perspective. Some of this might be shared views. You guys might have had similar experiences. But what I do is I talk to a lot of others in the industry that I've got relationships with. Guys at NCC, guys at Context. I don't know Context, but you won't know the guys I know, I think. MDSec, they're a UK firm. You guys are probably familiar with guys over at Specs with Ops, used to be at Veris Group. And we share tools, we share tradecraft, stories over beers, etc. The feedback I've had is that these are shared experiences. So hopefully you guys might get some resonance from them as well. I'm going to be talking at a high level to get through it all. But if anyone wants to grab me and go into detail afterwards, you can buy me a beer or I'll buy you a beer. It doesn't really matter. I'm quite happy to talk about this stuff. Okay, so very quick history lessons we go through. So we used to start off 6, 7, 8 years ago, where to get into an organization, you just had to have a little poke at the perimeter. There was always a weak service, an API, an app or something. It'd drop you into a shell, you could reverse proxy, you could use all your pen test tools. It really wasn't hard. And then you were straight into the environment and away you went. No one was really defending, no one was really looking. So in and out, easy days, aren't we clever? Then things got that little bit harder. Defenders started going, I don't want this to be as easy as it is anymore. Started plugging those holes, getting web application firewalls, all the usual stuff. They went to the perimeter and locked it down. So we had to think about, okay, well, let's go around the perimeter. What can we do then? And this is, the age of phishing. We shifted over to basically emailing the meat suits sat at the end of the computer who are easy to trick, and we sent them attachments or links to websites that pointed to something as simple as Metasploit Autopwn, where it just ran through and goes, what software are you running? There's an exploit. Great. Away we go. And again, you're using your pen test tools. There was nothing big and clever about that, but it worked a lot. Again, we felt like super ninja hackers, but really, were we? All it took from the defensive team to respond to this sort of stuff was to start patching the desktops, the browser plugins. Okay, there's a lot of effort made by various browser vendors and plugin vendors to do code a little bit more securely and plug this down. But it was generally we were using not 0 days, we were using patchable vulnerabilities months after patches have been available. So this was like security hygiene they just had to get right. A lot of those holes got closed, defenses went up, shiny boxes came out that would detect this type of attacks. They were easily signatured. So if you were sending through a malicious PDF, then someone somewhere had a signature for it. It was either in AV, it was in a mail gateway scanner. Same thing when you were visiting a site that tried to trigger some sort of browser exploit. They all had similar patterns. People didn't really customize them. They're all coming out of Metasploit. The defenders had access to the same tooling, so it was easy to signature and sell you a box that could detect or block that. So we were defeated. Our fishes were getting caught. Our exploits weren't working. We went from super ninja hackers to basically feeling quite crap. We didn't have any shells. And it would be quite an embarrassing thing to turn around to your client and say, no, couldn't get in because all your flashy boxes stopped us. So in order to react, we moved to more social engineering focused things. If our exploits were getting caught because they're easily signatured, that shellcode we keep reusing from Metasploit is now famous, etc., then let's just abuse functionality in common applications on the desktop. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with using Word macros, Excel DDE, PDF, JavaScripting, etc. All of them have built-in functionality that allows you to execute commands or some level of code execution, or built-in scripting languages that can be abused. So all we were doing was abusing that feature and a little bit of trickery, not trying that hard, to get users to click on stuff. Metasploit was still usable, but less so. We were looking at different tooling. PowerShell was becoming the thing. Everyone was, getting super excited about this powerful scripting language that was available in the Windows world for post-exploitation. Small scriptlets could be dropped to disk. You could customize them easily. It was fun times. AV completely missed it because it was legit stuff that was happening. So there was no real hurdle to go past. We felt great again. Super elite ninja hackers, APT1, Puttering Panda, whatever we wanted to call ourselves, egos a go-go, again beating up on the blue team. But there was a real back and forth, a tug of war between every time we tooled up and advanced, blue team would get some more tools and capability and detect what we're up to. Around this time as well, there was lots of advancements in post-exploitation techniques. Again, SensePost, Veris Group, SpectreOps, etc. I'm sure most of you are familiar with a lot of these PowerShell frameworks that are available. They've matured a lot, but at the time when they dropped, they were seen as like new magic. It just made pen testing and red teaming type engagements that much easier. You could get your shell, you could load this PowerShell, it would do all the things, you would get DA, it would draw you pretty paths on how you would route in the environment, etc. But the thing is, they leave a lot of artifacts behind, lots of breadcrumbs. They're easily detected. It's just at that point in time, not many defenders were really looking for it or doing much about it. So then we had detection tech that was evolving, all these EDRs, next-gen AVs, ETDRs, lots of acronyms that I've lost what they mean now. But basically, they were products that were specifically designed to detect these type of post-exploitation and exploitation techniques using the artifacts that were readily left behind. APT stoppers and the like that were billed as. Reality is it did make the job that much harder. Getting past a lot of this tech isn't easy. It can be done, and in some cases it's harder, sometimes it's easier. Depends how much effort you put in. But it's a hurdle. It's another thing that we have to try and get past. And there's nothing worse than gearing up for an attack, launching your attack, and a flashy box is what stops you. It's also embarrassing, and you go through major waves of self-doubt. I don't know how many of you do the red teaming. Are you always 110% confident that in every engagement you're going to get in and not have to try hard? So you have to stand there and think really hard about your plan, how you're going to get in. And if something like this defeats you and you've got nothing else in your bag, but it is still human being versus machine. We're still going up against pieces of tin, computer programs that are predictable that we know we can beat. It's just the amount of effort that goes in. But sure, things are getting harder and we're really having to earn our money now. And defenders keep upping their game all the time. I've heard a lot of red teamers slag off blue all the time, like those lazy guys, they're never going to catch me, I'm awesome. But really, they've been putting a hell of a lot of effort in. The more conferences I go to where there's offensive talks, there's a lot more blue team guys in those talks. They come along to get, that little bit of advanced knowledge. What's coming at me next? What can I do to prep for it? Also, Microsoft themselves have done some great efforts to basically steal away PowerShell from offensive red teamers and also threat actors. It's kind of, no, they want it back. It wasn't designed for that. You're not having it. We're going to build in all the security features and we're going to take your toys away. And they've done it quite effectively. Okay, it's, lots of restrictions. Again, you can bypass some of them, but you have to work hard for them. Everything's logged, or your artifacts are left, right, and center. To me, PowerShell is dead. If you're using PowerShell in your offensive operations, then you're going to get burned for most organizations. And rightly so. It's time to let it go and move on. Defenders are using things like AppLocker, software restriction policies, whitelisting. And again, there used to be this counter argument when you recommended this stuff going, that's too hard. People will moan and complain. But as soon as they see how effective it is, then they're all on board. And they've been mature about how they roll it out. They'll pick a small group of users to try it on, expand that group, see how effective it is, and roll it out. And we've been banging on about it, 2 organizations for years. Now they've listened to that advice, they're rolling out, and the benefits are there. And there's lots of organizations that we go up against that have this everywhere, and it's effective, very effective. So defenders now have quite an arsenal in front of them. They've got all of these built-in Microsoft tools for free. They're not having to pay third parties for them. The products are effective. Now, you'll find umpteen different talks at various different conferences calling one of these technologies out as crap and showing how great they are because they got past it. But I know it's tired when you talk about layered defenses, but a lot of these products, they're all turned on, all working in unison, they're very effective. Even if you've got one bypass in most modern organizations is not going to get you past the next piece of kit or the next piece of kit or that piece of software. But defenders, again, as I've gone through the years, at this point was still a large over-reliance on technology. So it was still humans versus machines, and humans are always going to come out on top. Until these guys, and this took hold, threat hunters, thrunters, whatever you want to call them. This stuff's a game changer. This is blue teams taking this very, very seriously. This is blue teams going, I've got all my boxes, I've turned on all my preventative controls, I've got all my detective controls, I've got a highly tuned response team. Nothing's firing. Everything's calm. It's cool. And instead of sitting back and going, there's nothing to do here, they're going, I reckon someone's popped us somewhere. Let's go and look. Let's go find them. So as you're gearing up to attack one of these organizations, you haven't even launched your attack yet, but they think you're in, and they're already looking for you, which is a big game changer. You have to be much, much more on your toes. There was a talk this morning by, I can't pronounce his name, I'm going to get it wrong, Mauricio. There you are. Your talk this morning, again, was kind of on this concept. What I saw from your talk was the same attitude and philosophy that I've seen in a lot of blue teams now. It's that we've got all this tin, we're using it, but it's not my tools, it's not my kit. And same from red teamers. If you guys are relying on the tools that are given to you, that you download in that's open source, and you're not crafting your own, then you're going to get burned. Same as blue teamers relying on this stuff. I've seen a lot of blue teamers picking up their own tools, crafting their own tools, doing their own investigations, and actively going out there and hunting in their own environments. And those guys are winning hard. So it's about this stage where I have lots of self-doubt. I'm feeling quite defeated. I might just go back to pen testing because it's a bit easier. I'm having to work so hard with every element of my attack. My phishing attacks, how do I get in, what am I going to use, how am I going to go about it, I'm going to get beaten by this, I'm going to get beaten by that. And blue team's kind of, you know, the one with the ego now, prancing around, waving at me and going, ha, you suck. And it's kind of embarrassing and defeatist. And you think, well, yeah, maybe I do a bit. How am I going to come against this? What am I going to do now? What am I going to do next? Okay, so do I give in? No. But I have to sort of retool and rethink about how I go about it. And try and put some of that negativity to one side. So we put on our big girl pants, we go back to the plan. Always have a plan. It should be an iterative plan, one that takes into consideration the defenses we might come across, and one that's adaptive, and obviously one that's never linear. But also it breaks down into very simple steps. We need to get a foothold and persist somehow. We need to do some intel, some recon, some OSINT, learn about the environment we're in, and then we have to move sharp, because we've kind of got to figure that even if we have got in, someone's going to come and find us. And when they find us, you don't want to get booted and start all over again. Once we've done that and we've found a little dark corner to hide in, we maybe do some more intel, some more recon, gather some more information, make some more plans, and then we execute our attack. And then we get out alive, quick, sharpish, before we're caught. So, we need to do our homework. Now, this, you'll notice John Lambert up there. One of the things that we have to consider as well is not just the blue team that we're going up against. John Lambert and some friends of his advertise a lot on their Twitter feed, stuff that they find in VirusTotal and other places that they come across. And they make a big deal about these campaigns. Now, he's come across quite a few of our campaigns and advertised them. And now, luckily, they haven't come back on us. But it's not just the organization's blue team you're going up against. There's other organizations out there watching their back. We've had our clients receive certain notifications that they're actively under attack and they haven't seen a damn thing because of the likes of John Lambert out there. So he needs to be in your OPSEC considerations. We've got a number of different lures that we go to. Phishing is generally the go-to strategy still. There are more, I'll cover some out in a second. But you have to consider, once you start your fish, you launch that attack, you've got no idea where it's going to end up. And you've got to consider for that. It could be John Lambert, it could be someone else. You could get burned before you even get going. Payloads. What are we going to do with our malware? How are we going to get past all these shiny boxes? How are we going to get that implant on a box? Well, we're going to have to obfuscate it. We're going to have to encrypt it. We're going to have to customize it for the target that we're going after. Now, again, some of this was touched on in some talks earlier about how to smuggle your malware into an environment. But this has to be the de facto standard now. You have to be doing everything you can to hide your payloads from those boxes, smuggle them past various different sandbox technologies that are in play, various different detectors, and the most effective way to do that is to encrypt them, use the sandbox evasion techniques, and various different bypasses. There's a lot of prep that goes into putting one of these payloads together, and there's some tooling that can help with that. We need to, so Cactus Torch from MDSec and Sharpshooter that's coming out in a week or two. These are really good tools for generating loaders or stagers, etc., whatever terminology you're more familiar with, using more esoteric techniques that a lot of different detection capabilities, tooling aren't able to spot. Various different pieces of client-side script and then different kind of processor code loading approaches. You can use stageless custom executables. Staging has been so signatured, like Metasploit, Cobalt Strike, only recently changed and allowed that to be malleable. So you're going to get fingered straight away by Blue if you're staging your malware. So go stageless. Use COM, DLL hijacking techniques, etc. That stuff largely flies under the radar. We have our own implant that's still in development. We may or may not release it, called Inappropriate Touch. And this uses some, well, we try and employ the latest techniques, memory evasion techniques, and things like that. It's still in dev, but we rely on Cobalt Strike under the hood. Everything we develop is developed to work with that as well. And I'll mention something like that in a little while. But phishing isn't your only way. If everyone's looking at emails coming in or websites, everyone's on the cloud now. Everyone's using various different communication tools, whether it's some kind of mail client or chat client or collaboration server. And a lot of these are single-factor authentication. Is anyone familiar with the Have I Been Pwned efforts, which is basically an online catalog of various breaches and dumps? And it's the same sort of thing. If you can go and grab those, people are lazy, they reuse passwords, that might get you in. Or you do a bit of intelligence, use your brain, figure them out. You can normally find an account. Once you've got a Skype chat going, a Yammer chat, an email, whatever, it's easy to get them to run your payloads and no one's watching for it. Also, there's various functionalities within them that can be abused. If you can get into SharePoint, upload a macro-enabled document to something that someone's going to open. Again, it's just employing those techniques. Two-factor authentication, sort that out, but most people are still on 1FA. Some good tooling again from MDSec, like Link Sniper, that'll help you automatically identify the endpoints and brute force them. SensePost released a tool called Ruler that will allow you to abuse functionality within Outlook to execute code based on various trigger conditions. We also put out some tooling called Peas, which allows you to abuse Exchange Active Sync protocols to read file systems and things like that. That's quite useful. And you can see where this is going. People are releasing more and more tooling that's available to look at more esoteric insertion vectors. So what about phoning home? Again, there was another talk a little earlier by, I'm not going to do Brandon's surname because I don't want to upset him, but also Brandon and Andrew Johnston a little bit earlier did a talk where they mentioned symmetric and asymmetric C2 channels. Now what we've developed, and we'll be releasing this in a couple of weeks, sorry it's not out now, but if you follow the feed we'll push it out and we'll be releasing the framework, potentially not all the modules that go along with it. But essentially this allows you to use the external API functionality of Cobalt Strike to implement your own custom C2 channels where you have full control over them. They're malleable. We've got modules for Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, etc. And we can blend in within the environment using existing business tools so that any threat hunters or flashy boxes that are looking for this stuff, we can fly it and blend in, living off the land, etc. Also, you don't want to get burned once you are in with your implant. We've gone to all this trouble to get our insertion vector, either by phishing, bypass those defenses, either come in through Skype or whatever it may be. Once you're in, do not use PowerShell. It will get you burned immediately by most mature organizations. Okay, and I know there's some frameworks out there, some tooling that's about I'm not PowerShell, I'm just a wrapper around system.NET automation. But smart people are looking at that as well. So that's going to get you burned. Or if you retool doing it that way, again, it's not going to last long. Usually in this case, we've got an implant. It's going to be a matter of time before we get caught and get booted out. So you want to do the least amount of things to get you burnt. So use things that don't often get detected, like WMI. Talk using bespoke and legit protocols, such as LDAP. If you want to move laterally, use the tools available to you. I love SCCM. I can use it to hunt users. I can use it to pop a shell on another system somewhere else in the environment. And I don't leave that telltale network connection that says I did pass the hash over there. If I'm going to do something like pass the hash or pass the ticket, do it custom. Most tools available don't do it in an RFC compliant or protocol specific way. If you're going to use these protocols, make sure those protocols look like the protocols that are being used in the environment that you're in. Best example is most tools do not put in the AES key when you do a pass the ticket attack. And most tools will trigger on the fact that that's missing. If you put it in, it flies under the radar because it should be there. So don't be lazy with your tools. Understand how they work, understand how the protocol works, and if you're going to abuse it as it was designed to be abused. So that's techniques, tool, tradecraft, etc. that you can employ that are technical. That's about your tools and the latest shiny that comes out. But we're doing people versus people here. Now, I'm not a psychology major or anything like that. But if you can figure out how someone thinks, how they'll react, if you can predict that, you can abuse that. And that's kind of where I get a lot of fun. So turn an organization's defenses against themselves. There's a big push at the moment for orchestration. How do you do things at scale? How do we connect all the systems, pull back all the information, etc., etc.? Again, it's that over-reliance on technology. If they're going to over-rely on technology and make automated decisions on that technology, then abuse that technology. So I might send in a piece of malware that's got fake indicators of compromise, and my real indicators of compromise will only be triggered when the real target uses them, again via encryption because my target's got it or whatever it may be. If that's running a sandbox and a blue team takes away the IOCs and then blocks those C2 domains and pats themselves on the back and thinks we're done here and doesn't send a threat hunter out, then we've got a longer time to carry on with it. Or if I keep getting burned within 4 hours, I make a plan for what I need to do in that 4 hours. Most defenders will think that I'm going to go through a linear methodology. I'm going to follow one attack path. I'm going to come in, as soon as I breach, I do X, Y, Z. But the second time I breach, I don't need to do X, Y, Z. I need to do A, B, C. Because I've got information, I've got intel, I've adapted my plan, and I do something different. If the blue team doesn't adapt to my attack, and I can predict what their behaviors are, I'll get by them. I might use persistence mechanisms that are esoteric that can't be detected. I might breach and then leave that alone and walk away. And a defender that looks at that environment and can't see how I persisted then nukes the machine, thinks it's clean, but I've backdoored a template file on a file system, or I've put in an Outlook rule into Exchange. There's nothing on the box. I wait 6 months, I wait 12 months, I set in my trigger, and I'm back and it's happy days. If they didn't account for that in their playbook, then I win. Smoke screens. This is fun. If you feel yourself being chased, that you've seen C2 go down, people are probing your infrastructure, then use diversionary tactics. Launch a DDoS attack, spam the entire internal domain with malware that's going to fire alerts on all the boxes because it's stupid malware. Everyone eyeballs shift, and then you get on with what you need to do. These also aren't just my tactics. These are all been played by various different threat actors in the real as well. Okay, so how do you respond to these TTPs? What can you be doing as a defender? And sadly, it's still quite boring. I'm not going to say like the email gateway solutions. It's all 101. Scan incoming mail, run it in a sandbox. Do it for every web download. Put two-factor authentication everywhere. Make it harder. Make it really hard for an attacker. All these defensive technologies get beaten on all the time, and people slag them off and say, I can get around it, I can do this, aren't I tricky, aren't I clever? In the real world, if you keep coming across another layer, another layer, another layer, there's increased opportunity for you getting burned, for the defensive team to learn new tactics, and to keep shutting you down. There's some really great models from Microsoft now. The Red Forest. I mean, you want to make that attack path as complicated and twisty and turny as you possibly can. The Red Forest is a difficult concept to get your head around. It's also a lot of hard work, but if you can get there, there's a load of security built into Microsoft Enterprise environments now in the latest versions of server software that you'd spend a lot of money on buying from third parties, which you no longer need to spend. But the endpoints run everything, patch everything, make sure everything's up to date, all the Microsoft stuff, whitelist all the things, SRP. I know it's hard, but it's doable, and when it's done well, it makes my job so hard to get that foothold, to get my post-exploitation tools on there, to push along. And again, it's about, deploy antivirus. People hate on antivirus, but it's effective at catching really low-level crap. Get the low-level crap out of the way, focus on the better stuff. But the key point for any defensive strategy is people. You need to invest in your people. If you're an organization, you've got a blue team, or you're outsourcing it, whatever model you have, you need to be giving them training, education, putting them through these type of live fire exercises, making sure that they're honed, they're trained, they're fight ready, they're familiar with these tactics and techniques, and they've got the tools to react to them. Yes, use technology, but humans should be using technology as tools, not the other way around. I just want to put up a slide that thanks these people for their papers, their tools, things they've shared with me either directly or indirectly. I've leveraged a lot of it over the years. And I know there was a talk slightly earlier about .NET malware and the increase of it. You should really read the paper from Malware Unicorn about some advancements that are going on there on how to detect .NET malware through various different instrumentations. Right now, when I say PowerShell's dead, everyone's looking around, how do we retool? What do we deploy now? What do we shift to? And a lot of people are looking at .NET as a viable vector. I'm kind of on pause with that at the moment because of that research. And it's something you should read up on and have a look if you're going to take this seriously. Okay, so that is the end. Please have a look at the Twitter feeds. Some of that tooling will be announced in the next few weeks. You can go grab it, play with it, and have a look at it. Are there...
For some questions.
Please shout them out. I would happily answer any.
You said PowerShell is dead.
Mm-hmm.
How viable do you still see unmanaged PowerShell?
Okay, so this is my experience. The clients I work with, the kind of operations that I run and my team runs. If we use PowerShell, we're going to get booted out and done, and the client's going to go, I'm not really going to pay you. I'm not saying it's for every organization out there, but most of the organizations I'm working with, most of the defensive capabilities that I see in teams are beyond PowerShell flying under the radar for them. There are organizations where I'm sure you can run them off still with PowerShell. But I'd say if you want to be serious about your offensive capability, you need to be retooling and thinking about an alternative.
Do you think it's still effective as a initial way of getting
For me, no. It's dead to me. Yeah. The paper from Malware Unicorn will also show you where defenders are going now with it. It's not just the features that are available in PowerShell to detect it now and all the technology that's come along with it. People are looking at how all these evasion techniques are being employed and jumping ahead of the game and going, I wonder where attackers will go, and we'll start defending from there.
Great. So that's it. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.